Welcome to MissouriNet.com. I'm Bill Pollock. I was a little self-conscious and a little afraid when I had to go with my old school headphones here. I normally have earbuds. My brother-in-law has made fun of me for wearing these, and then I hook up with Seth Merenbloom. And you go old school as well. So they're like
I'm old school more often than not with a lot of things. So.
And to be quite honest, these are more comfortable. I love these things. So, but my brother-in-law he goes, "You got the big pineapple you're talking into. You look like Princess Leia." He goes, "Can you?" And he's much older than me. He said, "Do you think you can get with the time?" So, yeah, we're going old school. But Seth is a managing editor for Campus Press Box. He'll appear on their podcast. Also has his own podcast, SEC 411. We've talked for the last couple of years during Mizzou football games, which you can follow me at Missouri Sports. And so Seth and I share and bounce ideas off of each other, and I like to have him on during the season. So let's start with Mizzou. And my first question is, how concerned are you about the run game or lack of run game through the first two games of the season?
Now that I've seen the product 2 games in a row, I'm concerned about it. I'm not concerned with the running backs in particular as much as I'm concerned with the offensive line, because my expectations for the offensive line were exceptionally high going into this year because of the experience that they had returning on the 2 deep. They had some somewhat fresh faces there, but most of that unit were experienced. And so, my opinion was, watching that SEMO game, once Hansbrough went down, I thought, all right, we have this offensive line that's top notch. Ish Witter should be able to get the job done. And it was shaky. And then we came out against Arkansas State and it was shaky again.
Yeah, it took really until the third quarter for that to turn around. And Matty Mock had a big run in the first half. But then if you looked at their other 12 carries, they accumulated 12 yards. So outside of Mock's, which I think was a 27-yard run, I'm pulling that number off the top of my head. It was a 20-plus yard run. They were averaging 1 yard a carry against Arkansas State. How much of this is on the assistant coach, offensive line coach, A.J. Ricker?
I think at least a little bit of it is, when push comes to shove, he isn't playing. The players have to take the responsibility, once they hit that field for 60 minutes every Saturday, but last year I attributed some of the early season offensive line woes to A.J. Ricker being hired a bit on the later side, after coming over from Illinois. It sounds like from, reading some of the Columbia Daily Tribune articles that maybe some of the terminology was different that Ricker was using than what Bruce Walker was using with him and what the line had become accustomed to. So last year I was willing to give him a bit of a mulligan with the slow start. This year I'm not as inclined to give him the mulligan. They all know one another. They all know A.J. Ricker. A.J. Ricker knows them. So after last week, I think I made the comment on Twitter, actually. I want to see A.J. Ricker really light a fire under that entire offensive line and have them come out against Connecticut and really prove through their performance that the fire took.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should. They've got wins of 5 points, 5-point victory over Villanova, a 5-point victory over Army. This is a team that they should dominate. And, last year when you looked at the offensive line, I thought run blocking, they did pretty well. You looked at how well at least the numbers stacked up. It was the pass protection. And a lot of people wanted to criticize Matty Mock. And I was saying, he doesn't have a lot of time to throw. Now it looks like they're trying to figure it out on both ends, because I still don't think Matty Mock has a lot of time to throw either.
No, I completely agree with that, Bill. And there were times against Arkansas State where the offensive line did an exceptional job giving Matty Mock time to throw. The pocket that they created a few times just looked like an outright wall, and he could stand in the pocket and throw the couple of touchdowns that he did. But like you were saying, the line did have their moments again, and Mock had to kind of run for his life. But I think Mock is running for his life in a more mature fashion than what he did last year. I saw him attempting to step up in the pocket to elude the pass rush a few times. I saw him being more decisive with it, as opposed to what we became accustomed to seeing from him last year, where he would bail out the back, and it seemed like he was doing somersaults and pirouettes and hightailing it for the sideline. So if the line is going to have its struggles, I feel better about having Mock in there than I did last year, because Mock has shown some maturity this year.
That's a good point. Seth Merenbloom is joining us. He's the managing editor for Campus Press Box, covers the SEC. And listen, we can talk about the defense, but we've got limited time. I don't want to drag this on. And it's always better to talk about things that are struggling more than when things are going well for teams. So let's pick on Missouri's offensive line for a little bit. But let's talk about the SEC as a whole. You follow it much more than I do and have a better understanding of it. What are your takeaways after the first couple of weeks, maybe in the SEC East? Any surprises, teams that maybe disappoint you where you thought they might be doing better? What's your overall thoughts 2 weeks in on the SEC East?
I'll start with Florida. And they've surprised me this year. I know they haven't necessarily played top-notch competition, but the competition they struggled with last year wasn't top-notch either. And I remember a couple of years ago under Will Muschamp, Florida losing the game to, what was it, like Georgia State, maybe?
Yeah.
It was just really, really rough. So that was something I was looking at with the SEC East this year, was how was Florida going to come out under Jim McElvain? And they seem to have responded up until this point. But in a couple of weeks, the schedule for them gets quite a bit more challenging when they take on Tennessee. And Tennessee is a team that had all the hype in the world going into this season, and I never bought into them before the season started. And now that I've seen them play and seen Josh Dobbs play, I'm still not buying into him.
Yeah, what is it about Dobbs?
He certainly has like Paul Bunyan-esque hype and folklore built around him. I think. I mean, he looks the part. He's what 6'1", 6'2", 217 pounds. Looks great stepping off the bus, but then against the Bowling Greens of the world, he looks like a good player. And once the competition toughens up, gets Oklahoma at home in Neyland Stadium, he has numbers that all of us Missouri fans were just hollering and screaming at Mock about last year. And the Josh Dobbs and Tennessee fans, they want to kind of ignore those stats that 20.5 quarterback rating from him last week and say, just ignore that over there. We'll put that in the corner. So I don't think he's as good as the hype has said. The hype isn't his fault, and I think Butch Jones could help him out and the offense in general out immensely if they leaned on Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara much more at the running back position.
Is Georgia the team to beat in the SEC East?
As far as I'm concerned, they are, but they're the team to beat in the SEC East, year in and year out, and they always manage to find a way to stub their toe and lose to a Will Muschamp Florida team last year. Yeah,
that's a great point. I wonder how much. I still think Missouri has a ways to go in terms of gaining some of that respect and that footprint of the SEC that we've come to know, and it just seems to me like they're going to have to win a championship before, and I don't even know if they'll get the ultimate respect from sports writers in Georgia and Tennessee and Florida. I don't even know if that will help, and it just always seems like it'll be an uphill battle for Mizzou to try to gain that respect. But the way their defense is playing, though, this to me looks like a team that, with a couple of minor adjustments offensively, could be right up there with Georgia.
I agree with that. I was talking with somebody else from Campus Press Box a few days ago, and we were talking about all of the new coordinators that are in the SEC. You have Brian Schottenheimer at Georgia's offensive coordinator. Barry Odom, of course, is at Missouri. You have Will Muschamp at Auburn. John Chavis at A&M, and I forget who replaced him at LSU. A lot of these guys were really built up, and Odom it seems like didn't get the hype from the fans, but certainly got the hype from his peers. And based on what I've seen, he's been an absolutely phenomenal hire and has this defense playing at a much higher level in the first 2 games of the season than I recall previous Missouri defenses playing in the past.
Yeah, and I can't put my finger on it, but when I've talked to the defensive players, they seem more excited. They like what Odom brings, and it's not a knock against Dave Steckel in what he did. He had a certain way of doing things, kind of a bend but don't break type of philosophy. At least that's the way I took it. But then when I try to press the players, they can't really say. I mean, they can't give away.
Right.
But you can tell that they're excited and they're doing some different things. And you see, maybe a cornerback blitz here and there. You're starting to see some different coverages and different packages. This defense could be even better than what they were last year, and they lost some good players.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment, Bill. Based on what I've seen and what I've read and listened to, it seems like the players have a little bit more flexibility. They can play quite a bit looser because I think they're just being told, go get the ball. Just as simple as that, basic football, go get the ball. And then Odom has the ability to place those players in the position to do that. Because like you said, it's not a knock on Dave Steckel. They're just different defensive philosophies, and at least for the time being, that Odom philosophy really fits what he has to work with personnel wise.
And I think in the long run of the SEC, that will play out better, because I think eventually Missouri just had so many talented players, especially up front, and they're still strong up front. But I think that mentality that they've had the last couple of years, I think that eventually catches up with you. At some point, you've got to take chances and you've got to be aggressive, and I think put some pressure on offenses in the SEC, because eventually they're going to catch up to you. So I think they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's something that I really liked about the Arkansas State game, whether it was an accident or by design, it was that infamous defensive series where I think the entire defensive line were freshmen, with the exception of maybe Walter Brady, I think. Mm-hmm. And they got the job done. They're freshmen, so I think that bodes well for the rest of the season and really begins to quantify the depth that they still have on that defensive line.
Well, I said it, we weren't going to talk about them, but we ended up getting back to their defense, so we squeezed it in. So it wasn't all bad about Mizzou, that's for sure. Seth, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
My Twitter account is at SMERENBLOOM, just at S Merenbloom.
And then how can they find your podcasts?
The SEC 411. We have our own Twitter account that you can go to find it. You can also find it on campuspressbox.com. You can also find it on forlights.fm as well, and then you can find it on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn. All the usual suspects that you would go to for a podcast.
Good stuff. All right, well, let's do this again in a couple of weeks. This is good. Yeah. Well, I know you took the afternoon off. I appreciate that, setting aside some time on a day off to visit with us, and we'll catch up during the season, and we'll see how this SEC East progresses as we roll on.
Yep, sounds like a good time.
All right, thanks again, and thanks for watching us at MissouriNet.com.